Stay up to date on the latest political news this election season for less. Visit inforum.news/port and get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Subscribe now at inforum.news/port. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Welcome to Plain Talk, and we're talking to you after another Tuesday primary vote. Not in North Dakota, but in other parts of the country. But there are some very consequential things that happen in some of these races that I think are very interesting in the context of issues that we're going to be facing in North Dakota, issues that we're facing as a country. Of course, always joining me on Wednesdays is my co-host Chad Oban. Chad, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Survived trade deadline day yesterday.
Yeah, well, that's what Chad and I wanted to talk about was the trade deadline. I will tell you, I am completely befuddled. Like, I like all the moves that the Yankees made. I don't think we ever had we didn't have the farm system to get Soto. The Yankees are, the Yankees are a winning team every year, so we never get in the draft position a lot of times to have the sort of prospect package it would take to reel in a once-in-a-lifetime talent like Juan Soto.
Excuses. The Dodgers have the best farm system, and they never get to draft in the top 10.
That's true.
They just nail it.
Our farm system's not bad. And actually, if you look at it, like a lot of the players that we traded were low-round draft picks that we developed into prospects, which I think is really impressive about the Yankee system.
Well, and you got the Clayton Beater from the Dodgers for Joey Gallo. I heard he went right in there, the 12th best prospect the Yankees have.
Yeah, because I think he was like 15th for the Dodgers. So getting that for Gallo was who is obviously just cannot succeed in New York. I'm interested in seeing what happens in LA because there's talent there. I just don't know why. I think it was a mental thing in New York. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, he hit 38 bombs and was an all-star last year.
Yeah.
If he replicates anything close to that, the Dodgers got a deal. But the Yankees were going to get nothing for him.
Oh, yeah, right. And I don't know what else the Yankees could have done. We kept running him out there. He wasn't performing. But the one thing that worries me when we do a trade with the Dodgers is why were the Dodgers willing to move on from this pitcher, right? Because, like it's one thing to do a deal with, another team. I'm not going to, like the Pirates or something, right? The Dodgers know what they're doing generally, right? Like, I got to think a lot of teams like when the Yankees move on from a pitching prospect, I think other teams kind of have to wonder, what do they know?
I don't know. You look at the Astros with Alvarez, who the Dodgers gave up on a few years ago for a middle reliever.
That's true.
They gave up on O'Neal Cruz, who's with the Pirates, for the illustrious middle reliever Tony Watson.
Named after
they missed on a couple.
Named after famed Yankee Paul O'Neill, by the way.
Yep.
Which I kind of love. All right, so I had brought that up in order to tell the audience that we weren't going to bore them with baseball, and then immediately Chad and I go into like a 10-minute diatribe about baseball.
And we should not move on off baseball until we say rest in peace, Vin Scully, the greatest of all time.
Really, really just a wonderful, obviously Dodgers, he was a Dodgers guy, but a wonderful human being and a wonderful ambassador for baseball. Terrible life, but God, what a wonderful life too. Like, what a long, illustrious life. Would that we all be so lucky that when it's time to hang it up, that we have a track record like Vin Scully's.
I saw a great tweet this morning that says, you've lived a great life when you're 94 years old when you die and people still think you went too soon.
Yeah. That's really saying something. All right, let's move on. Kansas abortion vote raised a lot of eyebrows. And first of all, and I've been saying this since the Supreme Court ruled. There are two issues at play here. There is how you feel about abortion and how you feel about how law should be made. I am pro-life. I am very, very thankful that Kansas got to vote on this. I am very thankful that states and communities around the nation can vote on this. I am glad that this can be a part of the democratic process again. So did the vote in Kansas go necessarily the way I wanted? No, but am I glad that finally we're able to have these debates and that Americans on the issue of abortion are able to govern themselves again? Yes. That was very satisfying to me.
Yeah, Rob, you'll be surprised since we've beaten the hell out of this should the courts decide or should the states decide argument that I disagree with that. I think the politics coming out of Kansas are fascinating last night, right? First of all, you had a huge turnout, like nearly presidential, like 90% or 80% of presidential elections for an August.
Wait, turnout was 90, 80, or was it 90% of a presidential year turnout?
90% of a presidential election or something.
I was going to say, I didn't think the turnout was 90%, but.
Yeah. And then, there was no competitive Dem races. It was all Republican competitive races.
It's kind of like a North Dakota primary where there's just.
Yeah. And so there was no reason for Dems really to come out. And there was still this rocket. And I saw Steve Kornacki did an analysis of if the no vote, which was the pro-choice vote, got all the Democrats, all the non-affiliated voters, they would still have had to have gotten 20% of Republicans to get to the win number they got to. I mean, all the polls showed this really close going in, and then you saw this huge turnout, and it overwhelmingly voted on the pro-choice side. I saw some rural counties that haven't voted for a Dem since LBJ, who voted pro-choice on this thing. It's really, really fascinating. And again, women in rural areas, women in suburbia, when they get into that booth, how are they going to vote in November? I mean, I think Roe, the overturning of Roe, is a bit of a game changer in terms of what we're looking at this November around the country.
I agree with most of that, and I don't think there's any. This is not me trying to diminish what happened, because I think it was significant. I think it was a big loss for the pro-life side. There is some context, and it was an odd measure, because essentially it wasn't a specific policy proposal that was on the ballot. What was on the ballot was, should we change the state constitution so that the legislature would be allowed to make some sort of restrictive abortion policy in the future? Question marks don't do very well on the ballot, ever. And so that didn't surprise me. I was always thinking that it was going to go down for that reason. I thought it would be a little. I think ultimately the no side won by like 18%.
18%.
Somewhere. I think this morning when I checked the result, I think it was like 18%, because last night there were still results coming in. But in that ballpark, landslide victory. Question marks don't do well on the ballot, though. I don't think voters like voting for something that's uncertain. They like voting for something that's concrete. And so, I think they perceived as if, well, if we change the state constitution, we're giving the legislature a blank check. I have a feeling in a couple of years, and I think this is going to play out in Kansas, I think this is going to play out in maybe states representing most of the population of the United States, we're going to end up with policies that have some level of abortion restriction. I think something like if you had a specific policy in Kansas that was a 15-week, 12-week, somewhere in that ballpark ban with some exceptions, I think that has a lot better shot of passing than what was on the ballot last night. But what this show, and especially as we're a little far removed from the heat of Dobbs being overturned, I think that's going to be a very different dynamic. I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that's going to be a very different dynamic. But again, I am very glad that this is now part of the Kansas were able to have their say. And it's after all the stuff that the Supreme Court is vile and they're evil and they're terrible. This is what the courts told the states they could do now. The courts didn't take a position on abortion. The Supreme Court said the U.S. Constitution is neutral on the question of abortion. They said legislatures, go figure this out. Kansas did. I think that's a good thing.
Rob, you keep going back to the same argument that we've had several times. And again,
but it's a good argument.
It's a good argument. I assume you think it's a good argument, or else you wouldn't use it all the time. I think the other interesting thing about Kansas is Kansas has a track record of some pretty heavy stuff dealing with abortion. I think that's where Dr. Tiller was murdered. So I think this has been sort of an issue that's been at the forefront in Kansas for some time.
I was reading something in National Review by Ramesh Panuru, and he grew up in Kansas. And he said, contrary to popular opinion, I mean, because of some of the things that you've talked about, Kansas is not necessarily like this bastion of pro-life sympathies. It's a red state. It's generally a conservative state, generally votes for Republicans. But on this specific issue, and I think abortion's a lot weirder an issue than people realize. And I think we're going to have some things revealed about the abortion issue as people are allowed to take consequential votes on the issue again. We're going to find out that the politics of abortion maybe aren't quite what we thought they were.
Well, particularly as people get into the secrecy of a booth. I think one thing, if the legislature is voting on this, but I think when people get into the secrecy of the booth and they think about some of the different situations or their life experience or their kids and grandkids or, miscarriages and infertility, all these different things that could be affected by these kind of policies. I think once you get in that booth and you think about, do you want the government involved in these decisions or not? I think there's a lot of people, even on the conservative side, that are like, that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable.
I think, however, like you can be against abortion and also look at the difficulties that are attendant to enforcing something like an abortion ban, right? So it'd be like, I don't want people to get abortion. So for instance, I had lunch with a friend earlier this week, conservative friend, member of the Federalist Society and everything else. And we were talking about like in North Dakota, we have an exception for rape. And I think you and I have talked about this on the show as well. How do you enforce that as a practical matter? Now it's very easy. Like if the pregnant woman is a child, then yes, I mean, rape's a given. You cannot impregnate a child without raping them. However, if you get into it where you have somebody who's old enough to give consent, and they just say they were raped, how do you establish that a rape has taken place? Do we have to adjudicate? Do we have to convict somebody in a court of law? Can they just make an accusation? Do they have to give a name? I don't know the answers to these things. And so this is what the Supreme Court's done. Is it was very easy when Roe was still in place to say we're gonna ban abortion after you can detect a heartbeat. And there's exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother, right? It was easy to say that, and then people vote on it, and it passes. And nobody really thought very deeply about it because it was never actually going to be enforced as law until Roe was overturned. Yep. Now these things are going to be enforced by law, and now people have to start thinking about the nuances of these policies, and I think that's going to be a game changer for this issue.
Well, and I think we saw Representative Zach Ista and Representative Carla Rose Hansen ask some clarifying questions of the Attorney General's office.
Appropriate questions.
Yep, on many of these things that we're talking about here. But again, I mean, looking at the politics of all of this, when you drive this level of turnout, and it looks like the pro-life side spent way more money in Kansas than the pro-choice side to have this kind of result. And I do think it's not just, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-life. I mean, there's privacy issues that come into this. And I think that there is sort of conservative case to be made, even if you're pro-life. But, it'll be interesting, all the different questions that we talk about, the exemptions for alleged rape, because that's the only effective way to use that exemption, because there's no way that
how in the world could you adjudicate something within we were even talking, my friend and I, we were talking like, do we have to set up like an additional, like an auxiliary judicial system to adjudicate those sorts of accusations on a sped up timeline to try to, I mean, obviously absurd, right? We're not going to do that.
Obviously. And then you run into, does the alleged rapist get a fair trial if they're sped through just in order to meet the exemption? I mean, I always laugh that our Constitution guarantees a right to a speedy trial that nobody really wants, right?
Yeah. Everybody who's in that position wants to filibuster.
Yeah. Let's pump the brakes.
Slow it down. Let me hold on. Anyway,
But
so
yeah, and some of the commentary I saw going into the vote yesterday was it was going to be close. So I'm still sort of analyzing some of the things that we're seeing, and from Kansas. And I also think that we all make this much bigger jump. Kansas has a bunch of different variables that maybe we won't see in every other state. That this isn't necessarily going to mean, oh, the Democrats are going to be okay in November now because of this vote. But it is interesting. And if it is something that drives turnout and there's more energy on the pro-choice side, it can swing some elections and potentially, allow the Democrats to hold the U.S. Senate.
I think that's accurate. I think it shows that this issue, at least at this moment in time, is gonna drive turnout in 2022. How it shakes out in the future as legislators and voters engage on this issue, I don't know. I'm hoping that we're heading to a much more pacific and agreeable environment when it comes to the abortion issue. I think even terms like pro-choice and pro-life are going to become very, very difficult because the pro-choice position that Roe protected was really, it was a very expansive right to an abortion, right? And far more expansive than most of it. If you look at the opinion polls that most Americans embrace. So again, if you say I think abortion should be illegal after 12 weeks, is that pro-choice or pro-life?
Well, and Rob, I think, the one good thing that has come from this court hearing is people are having much more nuanced conversations about abortion and thinking about situations that maybe people didn't want to think about before and what happens in terms of pregnancy and, the 10-year-old in Ohio, that situation, that's a real life situation, right? Sure. When you're talking about miscarriages, when you're talking about infertility, when you're talking about pregnancies that don't work after 5 or 6 months, and what do you do in those situations? There's a lot of complicated stuff that comes with pregnancy.
I'm pro-life, but I think that any law that forces a 10-year-old to carry a child to term is a law that should be changed. That's just how I feel about it. All right, let's talk about some of the other things. Michigan, I hate the term saying reasonable Republican, right? But it's kind of unavoidable right now because I was even reading some of the conservative columnists this morning where we're talking about the right was Jim Garrity at National Review, and he's writing just as a term of art as a columnist was talking about crazy versus non-crazy Republicans, right? Not even being tongue-in-cheek or anything about it. It was just this is how we're organizing these people. It's crazy versus non-crazy. So Peter, and I cannot pronounce this guy's last name.
I think we went with Maher last time. Mayor.
Yeah. Peter in Michigan lost to a gentleman by the name of Gibbs. Well, here, I have it right here in front of me, Rob. You printed this out for this reason. John Gibbs. It was narrow, but he won. And a big part of the reason why he won is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee dropped nearly $500,000, more than Gibbs's campaign spent on promoting his candidacy. And I don't get it, Chad. On one hand, I get it. Democrats, the DCCC exists to defeat Republicans. Peter Mayer's a Republican, but he's also a Republican that voted to impeach Donald Trump, right? He's not some extremist. So you're out there talking about the extremists in the Republican Party, and you're talking about what a threat they are to American democracy and everything else. And I agree with those things. But then you go and you spend $500,000 to help one win a primary. Do you actually believe that these are dangerous extremists?
Yeah, I think Adam Kinzinger, I saw a clip this morning, Republican on the January 6th commission in the non-crazy Republican camp, said it best. Democrats can't complain anymore about where are all the reasonable Republicans when they're, helping a guy who would be in the crazy camp win a primary. I think it's a dangerous precedent. I think the fact that seat is now lean D versus lean R, great. You pick up one seat, Dems. You're still going to lose the House. You're still not going to be in the majority, and you're risking having another Marjorie Taylor Greene or one of those type of people there with this Gibbs character. I think it's a dangerous game. I'm very disappointed that they were successful. You know, at some point, both parties need to figure out the democracy is in peril. I mean, we need to be thinking about what's best for this country, not just picking up one damn seat out of 435. You know, and so many of us were critical that there's only a handful of Republicans that voted for impeachment. You think you're going to get them next time? You think you're going to get Republicans to vote right when Dems are going to turn on you and spend $500,000? Good luck. This isn't how you get things done.
Right. I mean, it's bad enough that Republicans are doing this to themselves, right? It's bad enough that they're kicking people like Liz Cheney and that are getting kicked to the curb, right? I mean, Liz Cheney's not going to win re-election in Wyoming. I mean, I just don't. It's just not going to happen, and that's a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing.
Yeah, she's more likely to be president after 2024 than to be a congresswoman from Wyoming after 2024.
And that's, I mean, but the thing is why are you helping the Republican Party? And it's like, we're going to help the other major Democrat. Like, I get it. Democrats want to beat Republicans, but there's good ways of winning and there's bad ways of winning. I mean, this is like, I want to beat the Dodgers by injuring Clayton Kershaw so he can't pitch against us, right? Like that's not how you should want to win. Right? You should want to win because you have the better ideas and you've convinced people you have better ideas, not because you played some goofy game in the primary and you help promote, frankly, a dangerous candidate. I don't want to make Gibbs seem like more than he is. He's just a nut. But, I mean, the thing is, you've handed the Trumpkins a very powerful talking point. When people try to dismiss them as being on the extremes, on the edges, they could say, well, the DCCC was promoting one of ours.
Yeah, it's sort of, you know, I get frustrated when the non-crazy Republicans use the crazy Republicans and sort of empower them. And we've talked about with the Bastiat caucus sometimes, and that frustrates me. And I want to say to Republicans, well, this is what you get. I mean, like, you get into bed with these guys, this is what you're going to get. It's no different than this. I mean, the next Congress is going to be close. It's probably going to be the Republicans. And I can already see it. Democrats are going to be complaining because they can't get enough moderate Republicans to kill crazy stuff in the U.S. House. And these are the kind of things that lead to that. These are the kind, I mean, if you're Adam Kinzinger, if you're Liz Cheney, if you're all these different people, I mean, aren't you... Like, why would you work with Democrats in Congress after this kind of thing?
And the thing is, like nobody's asking the Democrats to like endorse Peter Mayer.
No way.
Just say, Peter Mayer is an honorable person, right? He's an honorable person. We disagree with him ideologically. We disagree with him on ideas and on the approach to governing this country. But I would rather have a debate with Peter Mayer than John Gibbs, because Peter Mayer is motivated by the right reasons. Even though we think he's wrong on policy, at least he's here to serve his country and to serve his district, serve his state, as opposed to someone who is just going to be loyal to Donald Trump. You can make that argument and disagree with him and say, we look forward to beating him, but that's the sort of quality opposition that we want.
And again, it's in the U.S. House. It's one of 435. Even if we're talking about a U.S. Senate seat, I might have a different conversation. I don't think it's right, but if it's about taking over the U.S. Senate because it's, you know, one of 100, maybe the conversation, because it's bigger than one of 435, but $500,000. I'm glad I don't contribute to the DCCC if that's where my money would be going.
It's a frustrating thing. Okay, so the other thing that we wanted, let's talk about this burn pits thing too, which I thought was just a sorry spectacle all the way around. Republicans should have raised their complaints about. For those of you who aren't following, it's funding for veterans who have health problems because of toxic burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. At these air bases or at these military bases, they would dispose of things like electronics by basically pouring fuel on them and lighting them on fire. And then some soldiers inhaled the fumes, and they have health problems now. It's a terrible, awful thing. There's been a fight to get funding for that through Congress. There was a bill that funded it that passed in the Senate, went to the House. Because of some technical thing, the Senate had to vote it on again. Senate Republicans voted it down. Jon Stewart did what Jon Stewart did and went on a rant and cursed at people. And Jon Stewart, by the way, I think even divorced from this issue, has as a singular person contributed more to the dumbing down, dragging American politics down to the lowest common denominator than any other human being. And I go all the way back to when he got on firing line and he sort of jumped all over Tucker Carlson and rightfully ripped down that sort of staged rhetorical combat, but then went on to create The Daily Show, which was just this constantly sarcastic.
Craig Kilborn created The Daily Show.
Whatever. Jon Stewart turned it into what it became, and turned politics into this constant sarcastic, smug, shallow entertainment. Right? I detest anybody who has tried to turn politics or has been successful in turning politics into entertainment, whether it's Sean Hannity or Jon Stewart. I hate these people. Right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being I don't know, glib or being funny. I mean, sometimes you have to laugh at these people, but I hate that approach. So having Jon Stewart at the front of this, and he's going to come out and he's going to curse at Republicans, it frustrated me. It frustrated me that Democrats wouldn't admit that there was a very easy tweak that they could have made to the bill and the funding would have gone through. I don't know. A pox on all their houses.
Rob, I think you need to loosen up a little bit on Jon Stewart, man.
I think he's a terrible
Stewart's
person.
Funny. Here's the deal.
That doesn't redeem what he's done to American politics. He is funny.
So here's what I'd say. Somebody wrote a column that said the Dems, quote, larded up this bill, which is quite a turn of phrase, Mr. Port, I will say.
Accurate. I would argue.
Was the bill larded up when Kramer and Hoeven voted for it in June?
It was, yeah.
And then Hoeven voted for it again when all the Republicans were against it. And then Kramer and Hoeven voted for it for a final passage. I mean,
those are fair criticisms.
About who's playing games here.
Yeah.
They vote for it, and then they figure out what's in the bill, and then they're against it. We're trying to help veterans here. And one thing I'll say on Jon Stewart, he won. This would not have passed if he hadn't done what he did. Here's the thing, Rob. I think 5 minutes on Jon Stewart being bad. Give me a couple of minutes here.
Fair enough.
The other thing I will say is nothing drives me crazier than conservatives saying we support the blue as they're tearing down the Capitol on January 6th.
That's fair.
Or we support the military, we support the veterans. But then they play these games. You can say the Dems larded it up, but there's also games on the Republican side.
Sure.
They were mad at Manchin for, getting on board with the mini Build Back Better. That's what this is about. This has nothing to do with the budgetary gimmicks.
Yeah. That's all fair. I'm not gonna contest any of that. It frustrates me when Republicans only care about fiscal conservatism when it's I don't know what convenient, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Now, to be fair, the person at the heart of Senator Toomey, who by the way is not a crazy Republican from Pennsylvania, he's not running for re-election. He is a fiscal conservative, often angers people by his demands that we do things right. I think his objection to this bill was completely valid, and it should have been changed. Essentially, what it does is it reclassifies a whole almost $400 billion in spending from discretionary to non-discretionary. We have a problem. We are running a consistent budget deficit in this country of hundreds of billions of dollars a year, right? And so part of the problem is we have put so much of the federal budget into non-discretionary spending to where, once it's there, it's like we can't ever get rid of it. That's a real problem. Now, do Republicans have credibility to raise that problem in this context? Absolutely not, because they don't care about it most of the time unless they need cover. Now, will Republicans try to pay Democrats back for some other stupid thing that they've done in Congress? Yes, absolutely. And were they playing it being fiscal conservatives now when they needed cover for doing that? Yes, absolutely. But that doesn't change the fact that Democrats could have made one change for the bill, alleviate this, and you don't need Jon Stewart acting like a jackhole in front of cameras to do it.
But why was it good enough for John Hoeven, but wasn't good enough for Kevin
Honestly,
Kramer?
and I don't know that they would never say this out loud. I don't think they read the bill that closely. I don't think they really considered it.
But hold on,
or either they didn't really read the bill that closely, or they needed cover for other shenanigans. And by the way, John Hoeven voted for it both times. It's Kramer's.
That's what I'm saying is,
yeah.
They both voted for it the first time. The second time, Kramer was against it because, it's going to spend $400 billion or whatever. So then why did John Hoeven vote for it? Is John Hoeven for spending an extra $400 billion? Or is this just a BS argument that conservatives were making?
That's the problem.
Try to score political points.
It shouldn't be a BS argument. They should be principled on this stuff all the time. It's just that they're not. They're not most of the time. It is an enduring frustration I have with Republicans.
But Rob, if they make this made this $400 billion non-discretionary, that doesn't mean anybody has to spend another $400 billion in discretionary funds, right? I'm confused by sort of the budget. So the theory is they're going to tie up this $400 billion, and then they're still going to spend the $400 billion in discretionary funds anyway on other things not related to the vets. They don't have to spend that $400 billion of discretionary, do they?
Oh, when does Congress ever not spend money that they have?
Oh, you're too cynical. You're too cynical.
Oh, I feel like I'm living in reality when you look at what they do over and over again.
I don't know. The Manchin-Schumer bill that just went through is going to reduce that they're trying to get through is going to reduce the deficit.
Here's the problem though with situations like this is it's like I'm trying to find the good guys to root for, and I can't find them. Right? I
have you have cancer. It's an easy group to get behind.
Right. Well, that's the thing. A bill like this should sail through. It shouldn't have taken this long, right? But the problem is we have people on both sides. We have Republicans who are only pretending they're trying to put the screws to Democrats for other things and pretending fiscal conservatism is covered for it. And then you have Democrats on the other side who it's like, if you don't immediately pass this bill and everything that's in it, you hate the veterans. Where are the good guys in that equation? We're the serious-minded lawmakers who are just trying to help the vets in that equation.
Well, we had some in June when it passed with 80-some-odd votes, and then if the House
but Jon Stewart was in front of cameras doing his shtick back then too. I mean,
sure.
Listen, I hate for the children policy making, like everything's like for that. Well, think about the children. Think about this stuff. We also have to think about, what I think about the children? I think about all the national debt that my children are going to be saddled with, right? I think about that too. That has to be part of the equation. But nobody can. Democrats.
That means we have to pass the Manchin-Schumer Lower Inflation Act because that's going to bring down some of the debt.
You're saying that with a smile on your face because you know it's not true.
Well, that I don't know. It's not true. Economists? Do you believe economists or not? I do.
I do. Yeah. Well, that's the problem, right? Like, that's always the cop out. Like, well, you must be anti-economist now. No,
anti-science, anti-intellect.
I don't believe a lot of the scoring and stuff that Congress does because of how often it turns out to be woefully inaccurate. I was told once upon a time that the Affordable Care Act was going to make my health insurance go down. What the hell happened there?
I think the insurance companies.
Oh, yeah. That's always the excuse, right? Oh, it sounds like Stalin. Like, the 5-year plan didn't happen. It must have been capitalist saboteurs.
Hey, it's sort of like how Joe Biden is lowering our gas prices right now because he asked the gas stations to lower the prices.
This is the problem. It's like
leadership, brother. Leadership.
Our political debates are built on this unwieldy scaffolding of stupid. Right, like
I'm glad I could help with that.
There are bedrock facts here, right? There are bedrock principles that we all know exist, but we build these scaffoldings on it. Oh, if you don't support this bill, you hate vets. Do you think Kevin Kramer hates veterans?
Oh, most certainly I do not. I do think Kevin Kramer isn't afraid to play some political games.
Sure,
though,
I think that's fair.
Kind of stuff. I will also just say, John Hoeven, being an election cycle, probably voted for this every single time because he didn't want, and he's not going to lose election, but you still don't want in an election cycle for your opponent to say he hates veterans. So I guarantee that's even if John Hoeven
he just didn't want to talk about it. He just didn't want to talk about it, right? Because if he votes against it, Katrina Christensen brings it up on the campaign trail, as she would be right to do, and then he has to answer questions about it. And at the end of the day, like. In the galaxy of problems we have with the federal budget, is this little discretionary spending thing? It's very small, except that a few $100 billion here, a few $100 billion there. Pretty soon we are actually talking about real money.
But if I were a Republican senator, I might want to pick my fights a little bit better in terms of a few billion here and a few billion there, and not go after something that affects veterans.
But again, you're suing.
It's such an easy political thing to say. It's such an. I mean, these guys are against cancer treatment for veterans, and their argument is discretionary funding versus non-discretionary funding, and we're going to raise. And this is shenanigans.
But
and
they're not really against the cancer funding. They're just not above using the cancer funding as a political weapon.
Yeah, and Rob,
I realize that's a very fine and not very flattering distinction, but it is a distinction.
Yes, I just think that in the political world we live in, the Dems' argument on this thing was a lot easier to comprehend. I mean, I listened to Kevin Cramer's explanation several times, and every time I was like, that ain't landing with anybody.
No, if you're explaining, you're dying. But I also don't think it's a good thing that we live in an era where to get your political argument across, you have to put it on a meme, right? I mean, that's reality, right? Like slogans win, right? Nuanced explanations do not. That sucks. That's not a good thing. But that's the way it is. Jon Stewart style politics win. I wish they didn't. I think it sucks, but that's reality.
Yeah, and I don't think it always wins. I mean, I just think this was such an easy one because the messaging was so easy for Stewart, standing up and saying a lot of MFers on behalf of veterans. That's something that's compelling and easy for people to understand. It really depends on the issue. I mean, if you're standing up for vets, if you're standing up for cops, if you're standing up for nurses, that's often a winning issue. And if you're explaining why, no, I really don't hate veterans, that's not a winning side of things. Even though I don't believe Kevin Cramer and John Hoeven and Kelly Armstrong don't like veterans. I don't believe that. But this vote was probably a difficult one.
Kelly Armstrong voted for it in the House, I think, right?
What's that?
Kelly Armstrong, I guess I don't know. Did Kelly Armstrong?
No, he voted no as well.
Oh, he did. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I did some prep for this conversation, Rob.
Yeah, well, I didn't.
That's abnormal.
I didn't look at that one. Speaking of on this sort of theme of things that sort of distract from the more meaty issues, I'm looking at this Pennsylvania Senate race between Dr. Oz and the Fetterman, John Fetterman. John Fetterman. I'm terrible at remembering names. John Fetterman. And the thing, I just had somebody come up to me, someone who's pretty apolitical, and they were like, "Did you see all these funny tweet videos that Fetterman's campaign is doing about Oz?" And he does, like, he's getting New Jersey people. I think he had Snooki, or is it Snooki? Yeah, Snooki. He had Little Steve from East Street Band, Bruce Springsteen's band. Also, as I know him, Silvio Dante from The Sopranos. But they're doing this thing of like, because they're trying to paint Oz as a carpetbagger, right? Like he's actually from New Jersey. He just moved into Pennsylvania for some political opportunism, and that's not wrong. But the thing I pointed out to my apolitical friend is part of the reason why the Fetterman campaign is doing that. Well, I mean, a big part of it is it's an effective argument against Dr. Oz. But the other thing is Fetterman had a stroke and hasn't been on the campaign trail. And they are going, I think they're trying to play defense on that issue with this tidal wave of social media mocking Dr. Oz. Now, part of it they're able to do it is Republicans endorsed an idiot like Dr. Oz to run for the United States Senate. The man's a snake oil salesman. I don't know why anybody would think somebody like that is qualified to sit in the United States Senate, except you look at some of the other people we've elected, so I don't know. But I mean, the thing is like, were you aware that this Fetterman guy hasn't been on the campaign trail in months? And here's the thing: Fetterman's lead in the polls has been growing since he had the stroke, because you're right, they're absolutely on the offensive, spending this money as Dr. Oz being this out-of-state carpetbagger, rich, out-of-touch guy. I saw some Democrats say, boy, Democrats could have used this in 2016 and 2020 against Donald Trump, because it's working because Dr. Oz also just fits the stereotype. But I think you're absolutely right. They're trying to get the focus off of the fact that Fetterman's not out there campaigning 24/7. And up to this point on August 3rd, it's working. I mean, last poll I saw, I think he's up a dozen points. I mean, at some point, Fetterman's going to have to be on the campaign trail.
Right.
And if he's out there and he is incapacitated in some way, that's going to be a big problem. And I think that's going to be a big turning point in the race. But the problem is the Republicans have saddled themselves with really a not good candidate. I mean, to the point where someone like that, you know, could still win. And really, in some ways, like the sort of relentless social media mocking. I mean, you say like, oh, we should have used this against Trump. They're copying Trump, right? I mean, Trump usually did it himself as opposed to using sort of celebrity surrogates. But, I mean, that's the Trump approach. And again, I don't think that's healthy for politics. We're talking about Snooki, and we're not talking about, you know, the national debt or any of the other, you know, galaxy of real issues that are facing our country.
But I think during a campaign, and I think the three candidates I think of are Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker, and J.D. Vance in Ohio, where Republicans have endorsed such, they're all sort of celebrities. I mean, even J.D. Vance wrote the book about, you know, something hillbilly.
Hillbilly Elegy. And by the way, a good book. I mean, not a bad book. Was not, I mean, what he's became, I think, is not the person who wrote that book.
He was an anti-Trumper at one point, right? Now he's gone full. But I think all three of those candidates have said such crazy stuff or performed so poorly that it's hard to have a deeper campaign when you're running against candidates like those three. I mean, how do you debate issues with Herschel Walker? I mean, he's concerned about us having clean air in China, and I mean, like, so.
Well, you know, I kind of agree that we should have clean air in China, but
yeah, no. People need to find the clip of him explaining why we shouldn't even worry about clean air or something, because China's dirty air is going to come over here, and it was something.
I think probably, well, here I'm going to try to explain the point that Herschel Walker was maybe trying to make, and I think it is a valid point that you know, a lot of the green policies that we've implemented in America have not reduced the net. Like, we've reduced carbon emission in America by exporting carbon-heavy manufacturing and industry to places like China, who are terrible on workers' rights.
It's such a fair point.
Right.
And if that was the point he was trying to make,
right,
he did it so incredibly poorly.
Well, that's the point I'm trying to make. That is a wonderful point. It is a very strong argument for a Republican to make. And the fact that Herschel Walker can't articulate it is a problem. That is a huge problem. We need people who can articulate a conservative message.
But again, I mean, the reason why Dr. Oz won his primary, the reason why Herschel Walker virtually ran unopposed in the primary is the celebrity factor. Why did Tommy Tuberville get elected in Alabama? Because he's a football coach that everybody liked. Doesn't mean just because you coach Auburn doesn't make you a good U.S. senator.
Yeah, we do. We fall in love with these celebrities, and you know, some of the stuff, it's a little bit different. But you know, I look at somebody like Pete Buttigieg, right? Whose claim to fame, like, he was the mayor of South Bend, and like he kind of rose. He became sort of a celebrity candidate. Now he's in President Biden's cabinet. But even beyond that, like I think this thing that we do where we lionize an individual, Republicans have been doing. Like, remember Joe the plumber?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that was such a joke. Like, people were going to actually run that guy for office. And I mean, all due respect to that guy, he kind of got plucked out of obscurity because he asked President Obama a question one time.
You're not comparing Pete Buttigieg to Joe the plumber right now, are you?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. That's not a fair comparison. But I'm trying to say, like, we get obsessed with these candidates. I think you look at like the way Democrats got obsessed with Dr. Fauci, right? To the point where we turned him into this sort of god king of medical science, and he couldn't possibly be wrong. And anybody suggesting that, right? Like, you don't have to be an anti-vaxxer or an anti-mask person to think that somebody like a Dr. Fauci is fallible and is not the voice of God on all things politics. Or I look at like what they did with even like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? Where they created this sort of cult of personality around her. To the point where I think you could argue that Ginsburg probably bought into it somewhat herself, because what's the other explanation for why she stayed on this court that long and didn't step down at a point where a Democratic president might have made the replacement?
So, Rob, what I'm hearing you say is Democrats hold up Dr. Fauci, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Republicans hold up Donald Trump and Herschel Walker and Dr. Oz.
What I'm saying is that
I understand your point, but you're grasping at straws on the Democrat side here.
Maybe. I mean, you look at every once, and they haven't done it as much, but I mean, every once in a while you hear like a Hollywood celebrity. I mean, well, actually, look at the amount of clout, look at the amount of attention we give, Hollywood celebrities for their brain drippings on Twitter. Now, are a lot of them running for office? No. But
I think like a Mayor Bloomberg might fall into that, and Democrats sort of kicked him to the side.
Sure.
For president.
Well, I think Democrats
have a lot of influence in the party just because of his money.
Sure, but Democrats have had the restraint to not put these idiots in office. Republicans went full in and elected and I think for Republicans the dynamic's a little different because so much of like the entertainment industry, so much of celebrity culture is tilted against. Right? Like all the talented people left behind flyover country and went to the coast. And I mean, I think it's hard. So like, I think conservatives tend to do this when there is a celebrity or somebody of some level of notoriety who expresses even a mildly conservative or what might be perceived as a right of center point of view, they're ready to elect that person president, right? Remember like Kid Rock was going to run for president at one point?
Yep.
It's ridiculous. It's absurd.
Did you say Kid Rock or The Rock? Because The Rock was going to as well.
That's true. Although there was an open question on whether he would run as a Republican or a Democrat. I don't think.
Or an independent.
Or the same with the Matthew McConaughey too, where people like in Texas, where like is he a Republican? Is he a Democrat? Who knows? Maybe Matthew. Maybe we could find someone better than Matthew McConaughey. But the public's.
I would say though, I will give Matthew McConaughey credit. He would be exceptionally entertaining.
But Paul, it's not supposed to be entertaining, Chad. I want it to be boring, and I say this like I write about this stuff for a living. The fact that we have, right? I mean, listen. The Bastiats, as much as I detest what they stand for in North Dakota politics, they've been freaking great for my career, right? I mean, they give me so much to write about. And so this is me arguing against interest, right? My professional interests align with politics being crazy and entertaining, right? My interests as an American lay with it being boring.
Yeah, and my professional interests and my personal interests are unboring. So when I say that I want Matthew McConaughey and that he would be entertaining, I don't really want that to come to fruition. But
right.
if you can't imagine him having a press conference in the stoner voice talking about pre-K education, you're just not being creative enough.
All right. Well, you made me think of something he said during. Oh God, I'm not even going to bring that up. Well, that's horrible.
So here's I'm going back to Vin Scully for a second here. I got a text last night from our mutual friend, Brett Narlock, who said, sorry about Vin Scully, and then sent me the clip of Vin Scully talking about Venezuela and how socialism always fails and whatever. He sent it to me and said, this is why I love Vin Scully, or my favorite clip or something. If you haven't seen it, it's a really good clip of him talking about Venezuela and socialism and how it never works.
Right. And he's right. It doesn't ever work. And Venezuela is a failed state. But I don't really also like, I'm not really interested in becoming enamored with a baseball announcer, having some brain drippings about, but all due respect to Vin Scully, who was a brilliant man and everything.
I'm just surprised the California GOP didn't try to get Vin to run for governor at some point.
Well, I mean, who else?
They probably did.
Yeah, they probably did. You don't know. But I guess that's my argument. Like, I hate how shallow it's all become, right? And you get so far out from where we're supposed to be on an issue, right? I mean, getting back to like the veterans in the burn pits, right? Obviously, we have an obligation to help veterans, right? This is something that happened on deployment. They were serving their country. This happened to them. We should serve them. The other side, we don't have an infinite supply of money, right? So whatever we do for the veterans has to be done in the context of what we have available to spend and all the other needs that are before the federal government, right? That's a very basic debate. We can have an honest debate about that, balancing something that we need to spend money on versus where that money's going to come from, how much it's going to cost us, and all the other things we need to spend money on. That's the debate we should be having. And instead it becomes a debate about who hates veterans the most. And I hate it. I hate it.
And frankly, part of the debate should be why people don't read bills. I mean, I remember during the Obama presidency when conservatives were always talking about, read the bill, read the bill. Have you read the bill? Well, this what evidently wasn't a very complicated bill that 80 some, a big chunk of Republican senators clearly didn't read in June or didn't have the concern in June.
Or suddenly had concerns for some other reasons, and the concern was an excuse to kill a bill. I don't know. Hey, let's finish up talking about Nancy Pelosi going to China. I'm springing this issue on you. Or not China. Going to Taiwan, making China angry. I misspoke.
Yeah. So what do you want me to say? I hope we don't go to World War III. That's what I hope doesn't happen from this.
Yeah. I was very supportive of it. I'm glad she went. I was thinking about when I wrote about it, because I wrote a piece, writing words that I never thought I would write. Thank you, Nancy Pelosi.
I should start reading your columns before I come on these podcasts.
You probably should. I think it was a good. I'm very happy that she went. I think that America's had a rough go of it. I think that a lot of our domestic politics has been hyper focused on America's sins. I think we need sometimes a reminder that we still aspire to great things. We still aspire to stand up to the bullies in the world for all our shortcomings. Our calamitous withdrawal from Afghanistan was tough. Our sometimes confused support for Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression, I think, has been tough to watch at times. So I think a reminder of Americans basically telling China, listen, you're not going to bully us. You are not going to bully the Speaker of the House. You are not going to bully the woman who is third in line for the presidency from visiting Taiwan if she wants to visit Taiwan. Like, China does not dictate our foreign policy for us. And then even in the context when you look at like the entertainment industry and how willing they've been to engage in censorship, to protect communist sensibilities in China. You look at the kerfuffle in the NBA when a general manager tweeted support for pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, and then that shouldn't have been controversial, but it was. Right. We've been kneeling to them enough. I'm glad that she went. I understand that it was risky. And also I was thinking this in the context, like, politics used to end at the water's edge, right?
Yep.
Whatever else I think about Nancy Pelosi and her domestic politics, she is an American. She's one of the top officials in our government. And the fact that she didn't back down when the Chinese challenged her, I'm proud of that. I'm proud she went.
I think I tend to agree. I don't pay attention to foreign affairs probably as much as I should, although this week I think between the killing of the Al-Qaeda person in Afghanistan, the Pelosi trip to Taiwan, there's been a lot of stuff about foreign affairs going on. And I would also say, hopefully this shows that Dems can be tough when it comes to, standing up for the United States. But yeah, I pause to offer much of an opinion on this, having not thought all that much about Speaker Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. But I do agree overall with standing up to China and the fact that, we think of them as a market for a business. I mean, the NBA example is a perfect one, more so than another superpower who's potentially challenging who
uses slave labor, who is spying on us, who is potentially an enemy. I mean, and even I remember back in 2018 during the U.S. Senate race when, obviously some of the things that President Trump was doing with like trade embargoes and stuff with China were coming up. And it was like the only context that we wanted to talk about China in the North Dakota Senate race was how much of a market they were for North Dakota soybeans. And
right.
I want North Dakota farmers to be able to sell all the soybeans that they can grow and turn huge profits.
But at what cost?
But the thing is that can't be the only lens through which we see China. So I don't know. I was very gratified with her trip. I was gratified. Senator Kramer and like 20 other Senate Republicans sent out a press release congratulating her for the trip. So
yeah, I thought it was really interesting. That was another one of my takeaways, is sort of the bipartisan support for this trip. And
I was disappointed there wasn't more.
Yeah, but I did. Looking through the list, it was an impressive list of Republican senators who signed on. Was McConnell on it? I think he was.
He was. Thune was. Here, I could bring it up while you're talking.
Yeah, and I don't think Hoven was on it, but and again, sometimes these letters, it's just a matter of circulation. Are they able to get to everybody?
Yeah, Hoven was not on it. I checked
Yeah.
that. I'm pulling it up here. Let's see. Yeah, Mitch McConnell, John Thune. So there's 1, 2 in the Senate. Jim Inhofe, Jim Risch, Roy Blunt, John Cornyn, John Barrasso, Ben Sass, Marsha Blackburn.
But that caucus has a lot of dudes in it, doesn't it?
Marsha Blackburn, Joni Ernst. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, no, it was Susan Collins on there, Deb Fisher. So yeah, a lot of Republicans supporting it, and I'm glad they did. I think that was a good thing, and more than anything else, like I'm just, it is sad, like the January 6th thing. I mean, America's place in the world is we're this stable democracy. Like our currency is seen as a reserve currency for the world because we're stable, right? Because we have peaceful transitions of powers. So much of that has been shaken over the last couple of years that I want us to get back to being an example for the world again. Not that the world has to agree with everything that we're doing or every public policy thing that we're doing, but just saying, listen, we're doing it the right way.
Yeah, and show some respect and see some respect when they look at the United States. Before we log off, I'd like to hear you just say, I'm super impressed by Nancy Pelosi, because I'd like to, just take that clip and put it all over the social media.
I'm in print on the record saying thank you, Nancy Pelosi. So yeah, if you want me to say it, I'm grateful that she went. What did you want me to say again?
No, I can't remember, but if not long as it's in print, I'll put some memes together and see how many people I can get to call you a rhino in the next couple of weeks.
I'm proud. I'm proud of it, and I'm sorry if agreeing with a fellow American standing up to Chinese communists makes me a rhino. Then yeah, baby, I'm a rhino. But also, like, conservatism also means like being a fanboy for Viktor Orban these days. So
yep.
I'm sorry.
It's a crazy time, Rob.
Sorry. I'm going to support Nancy Pelosi standing up to the Chinese communists, while simultaneously opposing just about everything that she supports in terms of domestic agenda. I could still respect her for what she did. Like, I don't understand why these things became mutually exclusive.
Good on you, Rob.
Yeah. Well, I think we could put a pin in it there. I should say next week I'm going to be on vacation, so we're not going to have this Wednesday podcast, and some of the Mondays and Fridays interviews have been a little hit and miss if we come through the slow summer months. I'm sure as the campaign. I should say, I can announce this. We're going to have, I think we alluded to it in a previous podcast, but we are going to have conversations. I've been purposely avoiding the term debate for this. Although, I mean, we'll debate some things, but I want it to be good conversations, not one-liners and people, but conversations between all of the statewide candidates. I have them all booked at this point. The PSC race, Julie Fedorchak is in. I haven't been able to get the Democratic candidate, Melanie Moniz. I haven't been able to get a hold of her yet. We're working. Katrina Christensen is in the U.S. Senate race. John Hoven, they're working on getting back to me on a date. U.S. House race, we're booked. Ag Commission race, we're booked. The second PSC race between Sherry Haugen-Hoffert and Trygve Olsen is booked. At the AG Trygve Hammer. I'm sorry. Trygve Olsen is the cartoonist for the Forum. Sorry, I mixed up my Trygves. And the AG race is still one that I'm trying to book. So,
and Secretary of State. We got Secretary of State.
Yeah, we got Secretary of State on the books too. So we're gonna have a lot of them. We should have at least one candidate from every race, and I hope we have both. But we're gonna be doing those from later this month through early October. Is what
you and I are really going to have to train ourselves on how to shut up and let the candidates talk during these things.
A little bit. That is the tough thing. Although I think when we do interviews, I think we do pretty good asking a question and then letting the person answer. But when you get 4 people on a podcast, I always everybody's got to kind of get to the point and move on so that we can cover territory.
Right on.
All right. Well, that's it, Chad. Thanks for your time as always.
Thanks, Rob.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.